Have you ever believed in something before you've actually proven it? My name is Christopher Shore and I'm a 6th-year MD-PhD medical student. For today's video, I want to talk to you about how we actually discover new things and why I think the order that we've been taught is backwards. Most of us grew up with the phrase, "I'll believe it when I see it. Show me the evidence, then I'll accept it." It sounds like the most reasonable thing in the world. It sounds like exactly what a scientist should say. But the further I get into medicine and science, the more I've started to think about it the other way around. I think you kind of had to believe it to see it. And by the end of this video, I'll tell you about something in my own lab that I had to believe before I saw it. Before I get to that, I want to give you a small thought experiment because everything else rests on it. Imagine a man walks up to you and says, "I'll bet you $1 million that unicorns exist." Easy money, right? Of course they don't exist. You'd probably take that bet. But actually think about the work you'd have to do to prove that. To prove that unicorns don't exist, you would have to search through every forest, every ocean, every cave on Earth. And then you have to search every planet we know about. And then all the planets that we don't know about in the entire universe. And then maybe someday there might actually be a planet filled with unicorns and you'd lose that bet. To be clear, I don't think unicorns are real. But it's a foolish bet to take nonetheless. Because proving that something does not exist requires you to have looked absolutely everywhere. Proving that something does exist only requires you to find it once, one time. That's a huge asymmetry, and I think we forget about this constantly. Here's how it shows up in real life. Every time someone says there's no evidence for that, and I've said it myself too, what we're actually reporting is that I've looked in the places that I've thought to look with the tools that I've had available to me at that time, and I didn't find it. I didn't find anything. That's useful to say. But it's not the same statement as it isn't there. The space between those two statements, between nobody has found it and it does not exist, is exactly where discoveries are currently sitting. Now think back to how we're taught science in middle school. There's a poster basically in every science room: observation, question, hypothesis, experiment, conclusion, in a circle. First, you observe something in nature or in a lab setting, then you ask a specific answerable question, then you generate a hypothesis and you test it with humility that you might be wrong. I still think that this is a good description of how to run an experiment, and that last part, humility, is quite important, and I don't want to lose that on you because that part matters. But there's something that step one, observation, that nobody ever pointed out to me. Observe what? There's an unlimited amount of stuff in front of you at any moment. You could point a microscope at anything. You could run an assay on any sample, on any day, for any reason, for the rest of your life. The world does not hand you a short list of interesting and important things. So something or someone has to decide where to look. And whatever that something is, it happens before the observation step completely. It's the step where everything you could possibly do narrows down to one thing that you're actually going to spend your time on. I'd argue it's the most important job in the whole process, and there's no box for it typically on the poster. I think that something is belief. Not certainty, belief. A quiet sense that a thing might be there. There's a short story from history of medicine that I think exemplifies this. In 1854, cholera tore through Soho in London. Hundreds of people died in a matter of days. At the time, essentially everyone believed that disease spread through bad air, foul vapors rising off the filth of the city. That was the mainstream scientific position. So when investigators went into Soho, they went looking for the source of the smell. A physician named John Snow believed something different. He thought cholera was spreading through water, and because he believed that, he asked a completely different question. He didn't go looking for bad air, he got the death records, he went door to door and asked people where they got their water. And the pattern emerged, the pattern came out. The deaths were clustered around one public pump on Broad Street. That famous map of his that came afterwards to convince other people, it wasn't actually how he figured it out. He figured it out by asking people what they drank. When the city finally pulled the handle off that pump, the outbreak was already winding down on its own. The official committee rejected his conclusion at the first, but they came around later reluctantly. Here's the part of that story that I think matters. Everyone had access to the same information, the same outbreak, the same street, the same records, the same public information. The difference between Snow and everybody else wasn't that he looked harder. He believed something different, and that belief changed the question he asked, and the question decided what data he ended up with. The people who believed in bad air went and investigated air. They weren't lazy, they weren't stupid, they just couldn't find something they were asking about. And this is a normal feature of how a mind works, not a failure of particular minds. Your brain filters out almost everything and shows you what it has already decided is relevant. It's the same reason you start seeing a certain car everywhere the moment you decide you want one. The number of cars didn't change, your attention did. Seeing is not a neutral first step. Seeing is the downstream of believing. This brings me to my own version of this. Mine is a bit smaller, but it's personal. Let me set it up simply for you. Inside almost every one of our cells, there's a nucleus. That's the compartment where your DNA is kept. It's where genes are controlled on and off. It's the control room. In my PhD, I studied a protein called PIM2, and this protein was not thought to have anything to do with that control room. But we knew one thing about it: my protein sticks to another protein, and that this second protein is actually, its entire job is to sit on DNA in the nucleus. So I had a thought that I couldn't shake off. If my protein holds onto something that does work inside the nucleus, then my protein might be in the nucleus. I went to the literature and there was nothing. I didn't find anything. No one had asked this question. That question had never been answered or even put out there. This was my unicorn bet, showing up in my own PhD research projects. The absence of a finding was completely being treated like a finding, actually was that nobody had ever looked. I had no proof at the beginning. I had a chain of reasoning and a feeling that this might actually be the way things were working. But that belief did the one thing belief can do. It gave me the permission to look. And with high resolution imaging, we can actually see it, and this protein is in the nucleus, confirming my hypothesis. Seeing it doesn't tell us what it's actually doing there, but it opens up an entire new set of questions that might be relevant to cancer and cancer biology. So I haven't actually solved anything yet, but something that was there, that was invisible for a long time, but nobody thought to look, was now clear as day on a screen. Believe it to see it. This is the case, quite literally. My protein was in the nucleus the whole time. It wasn't in there while nobody was looking. It was in there while I doubted it. It would have been in there if I had never asked. My belief did not put it in there. My belief pointed a microscope at it. Same with Jon Snow. Cholera came out of that water in 1854, whether or not he believed it. The only reason his belief was worth anything is that he took it to a world that was never going to move to accommodate him, and then he checked. So I'd put it this way: belief is what gets you to look. Reality is what decides what you find. The question isn't how strongly do I believe this. The question is whether the belief is sending me to go check or keeping me from checking. A belief that walks towards an experiment that could embarrass you is doing its job. A belief that arranges your attention so you never have to face a challenge to it is doing something else. Being doubted isn't evidence that you're right either. Most doubted ideas are just wrong. Most are hunches, including most of my own. They don't go anywhere. That's the base rate. That's the humility on the poster to say that, hey, I was wrong. This actually isn't the case. So here's what I'll leave with you. What's something you believe that you haven't proven yet? And what would it actually take for you to go check? Please let me know in the comments below. I'd really like to hear them. If you found this helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'm proud of us for hitting 100 subscribers, and I will see you in the next video.